Hey, thank you so much for tuning in to Around the World in 80 Oysters, a live show about oyster cuisine, culture, and appreciation. I'm Julie Chu from In a Half Shell, and oyster blogger, oyster sommelier, and just an oyster enthusiast all around. I'm coming in here to you from Brooklyn, New York. If you've seen the show, you know that this is not my apartment. This is my neighbor's apartment. Shout out to Easton. Thank you so much. And today we are going to travel to the Netherlands, where I'm going to talk to this amazing person named Matijn Wijn, who's the founder of Oystercompagnie. It is a company that specializes in oyster experiences, Oystertainment, if you will, pop-up oyster bars, and also a wholesale business. So looking forward to talking with Matijn. Here we go. Hello.
Oh, hello there. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for
Yeah,
joining.
yeah. Well, and to make maybe life easier, we in Holland we call Oyster Company, but that was too easy, too difficult to register all over the world. So we decided for in the other countries like Italy and the US, it's called Red Oyster.
Red Oyster, that's right.
Yeah.
All of your
And
social
I
handles.
even put this little thing, little bugger on
Oh,
it.
perfect. Oh, you should wait. Can you go closer?
Yeah,
Ah,
that's oh, not being. Yeah,
so it's
that's
like a
our little
little red
logo.
oyster.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
Very
That's
good. Well, thank you
and
so much. So where are you calling or where are you coming in from?
I am at this moment in our office in Rotterdam, which is about like 60 kilometers, or what is that? About 35 miles away from where most of our oysters come from.
Okay, hang on.
Yeah,
I want to. Oh,
yeah.
this is,
I,
you guys just bear with me because I'm downstairs. I don't have my two screens, so screen sharing is a little bit different today. Um, Here we go. I want you to point out. Let's see. I'll turn down. Netherlands. Okay.
yeah.
Let's zoom out. So you were just saying that your oysters are coming from
Yeah,
not too
if you
far.
not too far, if you go a bit more south, you see Zierikzee, which is just above the picture. Yeah, and Goes. You see the little town of Goes. Just go down that road over across the water with
Okay.
your arrow. And well,
Here?
no,
Oh,
let me see.
here?
You got like 3 inlets over here.
Yes.
And in the third inlet, which has a dike, which is called the Oosterschelde, there you have a town which is called Ierseke. You're just down.
Ah, this one.
Yeah. Well, that's at this moment the epic center of Dutch oysters and mussel cult and
Oh,
trade
cool.
and harvest. Yeah, yeah,
Just I'm gonna zoom out just so people have an
yeah,
idea of
yeah.
where we are in the world.
That
So
looks pretty far away, but it's pretty close. Yeah.
how long does it take for you to, if you wanted to drive there?
And at this moment, when there's hardly any traffic, it would take you 50 minutes. And when in the old days there could be traffic, it was an hour and 10 minutes or something like that.
Got it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so before we begin, tell me a little bit more about yourself and how did you come about to create this business?
Well, I tried to give you a short, long version. Is that I had the first plates of oysters when I was 12. We were in Brittany on holiday, and I saw something which had 12 oyster huîtres, and I didn't know what it was. So I ordered it, and then we had this plate on the table, and my mom said, "Well, you ordered it," and which was in one way a bit terrifying as a 12-year-old kid. But I really enjoyed it. And I think when I started, after I was 17, I started to eat oysters wherever opportunity I could get, in every restaurant or whatever I liked. And I had good oysters, I had bad oysters, I had non-existing oysters, whatever kind of thing. And I would say almost 20 years ago, I had an accident, a car accident, and I had to stop working what I was doing. I was somewhere. I had a good position in corporate, and I got back to my roots, and I thought food, I was always interested, and I got into oysters with a friend, and we started the oyster business. Instead of having an oyster bar, we decided to go to people with a mobile oyster bar. And that's
That's
how we
interesting.
got, yeah, and that's how we get started with the Oysterman. Yeah.
Right. Well, so tell me, like, when you guys just started wanting to do something different, were oyster bars very popular?
No, not at all.
Netherlands? It's not.
Not at all.
Okay.
There were two oyster bars in Amsterdam. I was living at that time in Amsterdam. There were two oyster bars in Amsterdam. One was the world famous oyster bar in Amsterdam. It doesn't
Okay.
exist anymore. And there was another place where you could have oysters, but that was it. And once in a while you could have oysters somewhere. But we always bought oysters at the market, local market. They were fresh from Zeeland and had some oysters and really loved it. And then we thought, let's open an oyster bar, but it was very expensive to lease a place and to get it installed. And then we said, well, let's turn it around and do it the other way around. Let's do catering of oysters, but then not waiting for people to come to you, but we go to the people themselves.
I think I can, hang on, is my screen being shared again? You sent over some photos of this, and I just want to show people. Oh, that's another one. So this is kind of what you're talking about, right? So mobile oyster men and women.
Yes, exactly. So we got two buckets, one with loaded with fresh oysters, and the other bucket is with the empty shells.
Very cool.
Yeah, and I would say it's almost the ultimate experience to eat oysters because we get almost daily fresh oysters. And then we shuck the oyster sur place à la minute in French, but on the spot, just for you. It's freshly shucked. It's not pre-shucked. It's not like in a restaurant, which is also very good, but it's on the spot and there's nothing to hide, which makes it very interesting and very, in one way, a good experience. Yeah.
Well, you also, I imagine, get to engage with that consumer like in such a different way. They're probably asking you a bunch of questions as they're watching you open this, right?
Yeah. That's a fun thing. That's why we, before they start to work for us, the crew they get a training and a couple of trainings, and we always say we can teach you to shuck an oyster, but we cannot teach you to talk. So that's something you need to have as an plus-value, as an added value for yourself. And we try to train them and help them and give them all kinds of documents and lessons. What is an oyster? And of course, when they go out for the first time with an experienced crew, they're terrified. They're terrified. They're so stressed because in one way you're naked when you're open there and there's like 100 people in a party and you're there and you're shucking oysters. They all see, they're looking at your hands. So you need to know how to shuck an oyster and you need to talk about an oyster.
Right.
So due to the experience, the longer they work with us, some guys work already like 12 or 13 or 8 or 9 years with us. They get to a point that their victory is always when they converted somebody to the oyster religion, and that they had somebody who had their first oyster and enjoyed it.
How has that process been? Like, are most people in the Netherlands seafood fans, oyster fans, or is it a small minority right now?
It was a small minority when we started 20 years ago. It's growing because the oyster is getting more popular. But when I started, most of the oysters were exported to France and Belgium instead of to Holland. And now we still have a lot of oysters from Holland, and we import a lot of oysters. So it's getting more popular. More restaurants have it on the menu, and people are less afraid of it.
Well, that's good.
Fortunately, yeah.
So, okay, I want to rewind because before putting the show together, before being, connecting with you, I only had one very specific point of reference for the relationship between the Netherlands and oysters, and that is through art. So I like a few months ago, I was in Boston. I went to their amazing art museum, and they had an amazing collection of Dutch masters, and they're beautiful. And I happened to notice that several of them featured oysters, like as if, that was the Instagram back in the day when they would just paint, whatever they saw. So the oysters in the Dutch paintings, is that is that symbolic of something like how they were perceived back then? Were they more popular back in history? Do you have a little bit more insight into that?
Well, it's an interesting question. One of the things we do is we do pop-up oyster bars at art show.
Oh,
And one of the art shows we do is TEFAP, which is old masters and antiques. And that's the creme de la creme they sell to your museum in Boston, for instance, the art dealers.
Yeah.
And most of the art dealers are connoisseurs of their wines and food because they know what they sell. And it's an interesting crowd. And I have noticed that, of course, and I have took all the pictures of that's on the show. It's also the same thing with you. Oh, wow, I got all these oysters. And we figured out, and it's like a puzzle. You start to say, hey, why is this just this period?
Sure.
And we initially we saw afterwards that in the Dutch golden age, the 17th century, the oyster is for the first time being used as a subject in art.
Yeah.
Before that, it was a figure or a minor detail in a painting. But the Dutch took it as a main thing. And there were two reasons. One, it was symbolic for the festivities, or you could explain about it. And the other one, it was a way to show the still lifes was, it's a lot of still lifes, that you had a fortune to afford a painter to make something for you. And if you can even show whatever you had in your house to be part of it, and you had a really good painter, then it would send out a message that you were part of the VOC, the Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie, the first international company in the world with traders. And you had access to all kinds of sources which other people didn't have. For instance, you could buy oysters. Can you imagine that? What you said, it took me about 15 minutes last week to get to Ierseke by car. Yep. It takes about 1.5 hours by car to Amsterdam, but that's by traffic, by car. If you do that in the 17th century, it could take a week to get the oysters from Ierseke to Amsterdam. Then it's a different ball game. It's a very expensive oyster, and also it's very difficult to paint. I don't know if well, it's almost transparent. It's not like a solid color. If you make a chest, which is behind me, it's brown. But if it's you can always see through an oyster. And if you can have that in the lights and well painted. There are a couple of really good painters, Willem Klaas Heda, Peter Klaas Heda, the Beard, the older one. If you see those paintings, it's like you can almost eat the oysters as good as it is.
Yeah, amazing. So it was really tied to wanting to express wealth and status. And then do you know why they kind of faded away from being the center subject, or was it just a different era,
It's a different era, but as maybe said, I have this theory that when there's a high level of wealth in a society, the oyster are very, very popular. And if you look back to the Roman Empire, they were the first oyster traders in the world. What they did to get oysters in Rome was insane. There must have been cost a fortune to have like 1,000 oysters for a buffet, or 10,000 oysters on a buffet. That must have been insane. And you could see the back. It's like every time you see going up and down. So you see the Dutch high peak in Conjuncture. You see it at the French court.
Yep.
I go quickly. You go to the Roaring Twenties. It was tremendous popular.
That's true.
And always when it's at a peak. And I'm not sure if we are now at a peak.
I hope not. I hope we can just keep on going.
No. There's something going on. And then the oyster is very popular at the high end. And when when you go down, the oyster will be eaten by the local growers. Because of course, it's difficult to get an oyster from A to B.
Right.
It's perishable. It doesn't last long. If you don't sell it, you cannot put it back in the cellar like wine
Right.
or in a can.
Well, so you also sent me some photos of the oyster production, and I think you sent me many amazing photos.
Yeah.
This one in particular interested me.
Yeah.
Because I've never seen something like this before, where it just looks like you're in an oyster spa.
Yeah.
So can you tell me and everybody kind of what is the status of oyster production where you are, and I guess first what is going on in this photo?
What is going on over there? Yeah. So this is, we call it an oysterput, an oesterput in Dutch. And in one way to translate it really quick is to say this is the wet warehouse of the oyster farmer. The wet storage.
Yes.
Because there's a high difference in tide. When it's low tide, they can't go out because there's no water to sail on or to move or maneuver on it. So when you order on during the day and it's low tide, they can't handle the oysters. So what they do is they get the oysters in, they calibrate them, they clean them, and they store them in the same water, because this water is connected to, this is the same water as on the other side of the dike. You see the high building.
So it's flowing straight in.
It's flowing in.
Are they native oysters to the area, or are they the Pacific?
We have two species in Holland, which is the Casustrega gigas, the Pacific oyster, which is the rock oyster, which is also in the west coast. The Hamahamas are friends in that. And we have the Ostrea edilius, which is the flat oyster, which is also known as the ballon. Yes. Which is funny, by the way, because the ballon in Maine is originally from this area, because a Dutch guy came over there and they tried to set out the oysters, but it was a long experiment and it didn't work, so they left it, and now they're still there.
So those oysters, I didn't realize that they're from, Holland. I thought that they came from France. That's not the case.
No, but the ballon sounds nicer than a flat oyster.
True. Very true. Is one type more popular than the other in the market?
Yeah. The Kreuze, it's how we call it, or the Pacific oyster, is the oyster which is also more dominant. I would say 95% of the harvest is Pacific oyster, and the Australia edilius is a more intense and complex oyster, and it's more expensive because it takes a longer time to grow. It's not easy to reproduce, so it's a different oyster. It's by the way my favorite. One of my favorites. I have a lot of favorites, but it's one of the most unique tastes you can find. Yeah.
And what about the idea of sustainability? Is there interest from consumers around, I guess, just how environmentally positive oyster culture is?
That is slowly. We don't have a thing which like the billion oyster project, which we made dikes, so we don't need that dike of oysters, and we still have a lot of oysters. Even it's converted, like the estuary where we were talking Ierseke is. It's overwhelmed by oysters. We would like to get rid of half of the population. Because they purify the water, that's one thing, but they also take a lot of food out of the water for other species which are there, like mussels and other sea species. But now in these days, like with the, how do we call it in English? At WNF, World National Nature Foundation, I think, we're trying to set up some banks up in the north where we have some islands and make a natural reef with oysters, but we're trying to get it into process.
I see. Okay.
We'd like to do it, but it's not something which is high on the agenda for Dutch people. They like to eat oysters.
They just like to eat oysters. Mostly raw, or is there a cooked oyster cuisine?
I think raw is I would say 80% of what people consume.
Okay.
And in restaurants, some restaurants sell them also, of course, cooked.
Got it.
Yeah.
Now we're almost at time, but I just want to show people this other cool thing that you sent to me. So I understand that another side of your business is related to wholesale.
Yeah.
And also just kind of promoting the different oysters that you are, that you have. And this is something that you sent to me that is available on the website, but it's really just like a cool newsletter that you give out to your customers, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Just to give some facts about what oysters do and how they are breeded, or what kind of reputation they have, or how to shop them, or what you can do with it, and what you can drink with it. There's also
or to chew them or not to chew them.
Yeah, that's a good one. And even the autonomy, which is also interesting. People don't know what it is, but it's a very interesting species. But people, well, your audience probably know already what an oyster will do, of course.
Yeah, this is very cool. I love the design of this. I wish you had an English version.
Well, what I can do is we can go. We have, of course, the text, and we can put it through Google Translate.
Oh, Google Translate.
We love Google Translate.
So I have a couple of questions from the audience, and I always forget to tell people that they can leave questions, but you can, and if we can't get to them right now, we'll be able to answer them in the comments later. So one from Joseph is that I see that the Oystertainment experiences are available in the U.S. under the Red Oyster brand. Where are they available, and what are your plans to expand? Sounds like a fun time.
Oh yeah. Well, at this moment we're based in New York, and we do it in Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New York, in the state of New York. We love to expand, but everything is on hold in this moment. But yeah, that's one of the things. We also do it in Italy. We've been talking to really interesting people in Mexico about who have oysters. It's unbelievable. We had this lunch with them, and we just talked, Jody, you will be jealous, 4 hours non-stop about oysters and eating oysters.
All right, I am jealous now. The talking is like, okay, eating, yes.
So Joseph, yes, it's at this moment in the East Coast, and we're looking for partners.
Great.
Cool. Yeah.
And follow up. Can you come to my house?
Probably myself not, but somebody of us could come. Yeah.
That's funny. One from Mike. Are oysters a special dish in restaurants, or mostly served as an appetizer?
As an appetizer.
Yeah.
I like that, because it's, if you look at a real classic menu, you start high on acid and you end in sweet. And if you start with oysters, it's probably most of the oysters are high in acid. And it's when you eat the oysters, it opens up all the taste buds, and you can eat and you can taste afterwards everything much better than before.
Yeah. And then one other one from Mike is there an oyster season?
Yeah, we have a classic oyster season. The native one will be out of stock, or not to be able to deliver it in, I think, the next 2 weeks. And then it's over, and then it will be, we have then still the season with the R, and then it will be back somewhere half of September, end of September.
Got it. Okay, one more question from Ashley. Yeah. For the Oystertainment events in the U.S., are you serving American oysters? You guys, you're supposed to ask questions about oyster culture in the Netherlands, but it's okay. Everybody's interested in your services.
Well, Ashley, I would love to have the oysters from Amsterdam, but that's not allowed by law.
Not yet, right?
No, they're talking about it for 1.5 years, and I would love to start that as a site. But one of my French benefits is that we do once a year a road trip, and we try to start as high up north, out east, I think, up in Maine, and then slowly go down and try to visit as many growers as we can see and eat oysters. And you get some damn good oysters in the US.
Oh, yeah.
It's a young industry, I have to explain, but it's a damn good. It's getting, yeah.
Yeah.
I like, one of my favorite growers is from Brittany, and it's 7th generation oyster farmer.
Wow.
I have to tell, I had him on the phone today, and he said, it's a terrible year, he said in French. It's the 1st in December, we had a virus, a norovirus in the waters and export. Then we had the corona, and now because of the good weather, the dorade are coming earlier, and about like 20,000 of his oysters were eaten last night by wild dorade.
Oh
Yeah.
no. Well,
Yeah.
hope he'll be resilient like
I hope
everyone.
7th generation. I hope he will.
Yeah. Okay, I have one last question because I love asking this to anybody, to everybody, is if you could visit anywhere in the world to try their local oysters, where would you want to go? One place.
I thought, one place. Yeah. Well, I thought about, first I would like to go up to the Eide. I like that, interesting. But I think I would go to Chile.
Ah.
I think that's an interesting coastline. It's the longest coastline in the world. Things have to be discovered over there, and that's on my bucket list. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. Haven't tried a Chile oyster ever. I'm not. I don't know. Have you ever tried an oyster in Chile?
From Chile? Have I? I don't think so. I'm trying to think. The place that I would be at the Boston Seafood Show, but I don't believe that they've ever brought in oysters.
No, I think they also have the same ban as we have.
Yeah.
Which is rightfully, I would say, because if you start importing oysters from all over the world and put them out in the water, you don't know what's going to happen with your water systems.
Yeah. But you just have to go there and try them.
I think so. Well, I hope in the near future,
In the near future. Well, thank you so much for taking time and chatting about oysters.
It was a pleasure. It was a very great pleasure.
Great. Well, stay safe, and
You too. And crowd, enjoy. And we talked about it. 3 oysters a day.
Yeah, keep the doctor away. All right. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Thank you so much for tuning in to that interview. Coming up Thursday. Wait, it's today? Yes, Thursday. We're going to talk with Axel Steen, who is one of the partners of FF Oyster, a brand new oyster bar in Oslo, in Norway. So talking about oysters in Norway. And then next week, I have a ton more really cool guests coming up. So if you really like this episode, please like, subscribe, share with your friends. And then, I should also tell you a few other things, which is, I don't know if you know this, you maybe do or maybe don't, but if you're craving oysters now, you should feel free to go to oyster.guru/shop to buy directly from the growers. There's a whole database that I've put together of growers who are shipping direct to the consumers right now. And then for the full schedule, for the rest of the interviews, go to oyster.guru/live. So, and then finally, you should definitely follow Oyster Company on Instagram. And give us a shout out. Thanks so much. See you later.